The kitchen clock ticked louder than it should have, each second hammering into Samuel's skull like a judge's gavel. He sat at the table, a chipped mug of cold coffee in his hands, staring at the stack of envelopes that had become his life's ledger. Bills, notices, threats of foreclosure, each one a testament to how far he'd fallen. At 72, Samuel Carter had imagined his twilight years surrounded by laughter, his children and grandchildren filling the house with warmth. Instead, the silence was suffocating, broken only by the clock and the ghosts of his mistakes. It had started with $6, 218. Such a precise number, etched into his memory like a scar. That was the amount he'd withdrawn from the family savings account 3 years ago. A decision that set off a chain reaction he couldn't stop. He hadn't meant to hurt anyone. He'd only wanted to help, to fix things, to be the provider he'd always been. But good intentions don't pay debts, and they don't mend broken trust. Samuel's daughter, Emily, had been the first to notice. She was 38, sharp as a tack, with her mother's hazel eyes and a temper that could burn through walls. She'd come over one Sunday with her husband, Mark, and their 2 kids, expecting the usual pot roast and stories about the old days. Instead, she'd found Samuel hunched over the kitchen table, trying to hide the bank statement. "Dad, what's this?" she'd asked, snatching the paper before he could stop her. Her voice had been calm at first, but as she read the numbers, it sharpened into something jagged. $6,218. Gone. Where is it, Dad? He tried to explain, but the words stuck in his throat. How do you tell your daughter you gambled away her inheritance, her children's college fund, on a desperate bet to save the house? The house her mother, Clara, had loved, the one they'd built together 40 years ago, where every scuff on the floor told a story of their life. Samuel had thought he could win it back, that the slot machines at the casino 2 towns over would give him a miracle. Instead, they took everything. Emily's face had crumpled, not with sadness, but with fury. "You promised us, Dad. You promised Mom you'd take care of us." She'd stormed out, Mark trailing behind, the kids confused and crying. That was the last time they'd visited. 3 years. And not a single call, not a single Christmas card. The silence was worse than any argument. Samuel's son, Michael, was different. At 40, he was quieter, more like Samuel in his youth, steady, practical, but with a stubborn streak. When Emily told him about the money, he didn't yell. He just showed up at the house one evening, his work boots still dusty from the construction site. "Dad," he said, standing in the doorway, "why didn't you tell me you were struggling? I could have helped." Samuel had no answer. Pride, shame, further'd all conspired to keep him silent. Michael left after an hour, promising to check in, but the calls grew infrequent, then stopped altogether. The house felt emptier each day, the walls closing in on Samuel's regrets. He'd always been the rock of the family, the one who fixed leaky faucets, paid the mortgage on time, and tucked his kids into bed with stories of his Navy days. Now, he was a stranger to them, a man who'd betrayed their trust for $6, 218 and a foolish dream. But that wasn't the worst of it. The real secret, the one he hadn't told Emily or Michael, was what he'd done with the rest of the money, the savings he'd scraped together after that first loss, the last of Clara's life insurance. He hadn't gambled it. No. This time he'd done something even they couldn't imagine. Something that would shatter what little was left of their family if they ever found out. It was late now, the clock nearing midnight. Samuel pushed the mug aside and stood, his knees creaking. He shuffled to the living room, where a single photograph hung on the wall, him and Clara on their wedding day, her smile bright enough to light the world. "I'm sorry, Clara," he whispered, his voice breaking. I thought I was doing the right thing. The weight of his choices pressed down on him, heavier than the unpaid bills, heavier than the silence. Tomorrow, he'd have to face it all, the truth, the consequences, and the family he'd torn apart. But tonight, he could only sit in the dark, haunted by the number that started it all, $6. 218. The morning sun crept through the cracked blinds, casting slanted shadows across the living room. Samuel hadn't slept. His eyes burned, and his hands trembled as he poured another cup of coffee, the pot shaking in his grip. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that amplifies every creak, every sigh. He glanced at the phone on the counter, willing it to ring, knowing it wouldn't. Emily and Michael were gone, not just from the house, but from his life. And the fault was his alone. He hadn't always been this man, this husk of guilt and secrets. Once, Samuel Carter had been a figure of strength, a Navy machinist who'd come home from Vietnam with a chest full of medals and a heart full of dreams. He and Clara had built this house with their own hands, laying bricks and painting walls, laughing through the sweat and sawdust. They'd raised Emily and Michael here, taught them to ride bikes in the driveway, and celebrated every milestone under this roof. But Clara's death 5 years ago had changed everything. Cancer had taken her quickly, leaving Samuel adrift in a world that no longer made sense. The $6, 218 wasn't just money. It was the last piece of Clara's legacy, the savings they'd set aside for their kids. Samuel had justified the withdrawal to himself 100 times. The house was drowning in debt, property taxes, medical bills from Clara's final months, repairs he couldn't afford. He'd told himself one good night at the casino could fix it all, could save the home that held their memories. But the slots had been merciless, swallowing his hope as easily as his money. He could still see Emily's face that day, the betrayal in her eyes cutting deeper than any words. "You gambled our future, Dad," she'd said before leaving. Michael's disappointment had been quieter, but no less devastating. "We trusted you," he'd murmured, and those 3 words had haunted Samuel ever since. Now, as he sat at the kitchen table, a new envelope caught his eye. It wasn't a bill or a bank notice, but a letter, handwritten, with no return address. His heart stuttered as he tore it open. The handwriting was Emily's, unmistakable in its neat, looping script. "Dad," it began, "I don't know if I can forgive you, but I need to understand. Meet me at the park on Saturday. 2 p.m. Don't make me regret this." Samuel's breath caught. Hope flickered, fragile as a candle flame. Emily was reaching out, after 3 years of silence. But the hope was tempered by dread. She didn't know the whole truth, the secret he'd kept even from her. The $6, 218 had been the spark. But what he'd done with the rest of the money, Clara's life insurance, would be the fire that burned everything down. 3 years ago, after the casino disaster, Samuel had been desperate to make things right. He'd scraped together what was left, $12,000 from Clara's policy, money meant for emergencies. He hadn't gone back to the casino. Instead, he'd done something he thought was noble, something he believed would honor Clara's memory. He'd donated it all to a local charity for veterans, a group that helped men and women like him rebuild their lives after war. Clara had always cared about those who served, and Samuel thought it would be a way to atone, to give back what he'd taken from his family in spirit, if not in dollars. But he hadn't told Emily or Michael. How could he? They'd see it as another betrayal, another choice made without them. The charity had sent him letters, thanking him for his generosity, detailing the lives he'd changed, a young veteran who got a new prosthetic, a family saved from homelessness. Each letter was a knife in his heart, proof of good he'd done at the cost of his own family's trust. Saturday was 2 days away. Samuel spent those days cleaning the house, as if tidying the clutter could tidy his conscience. He dusted Clara's old piano, swept the porch, and even pulled weeds from the garden she'd loved. But no amount of scrubbing could erase the truth he'd have to face when he met Emily. When Saturday came, Samuel arrived at the park early, his hands stuffed in the pockets of his worn jacket. The air was crisp, the leaves a riot of red and gold. He spotted Emily on a bench near the playground, watching her kids, his grandchildren, chase each other through the grass. She looked older, her face etched with lines of worry he hadn't noticed before. When she saw him, her expression was guarded, but she stood and walked over. "Dad," she said, her voice tight. "I'm here because the kids miss you. But I need the truth. What happened to the money? All of it." Samuel's mouth went dry. He could tell her about the casino, about the desperation, but the rest, the donation, the secret he'd kept, felt too heavy to confess. "Not yet. I messed up. He started, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I could save the house. I gambled it away." Her eyes narrowed. "That's not all, is it? There's something you're not saying." He looked away, toward the kids laughing in the distance. The weight of his choices pressed harder, and he knew this moment would decide if he'd ever have his family back. The park was alive with the sounds of children's laughter and the rustle of autumn leaves. But to Samuel, it felt like a courtroom. Emily stood before him, her arms crossed, her hazel eyes searching his face for answers he wasn't ready to give. At 38, she carried the weight of a mother, a wife, and now a daughter betrayed. Her question hung in the air. "There's something you're not saying." Samuel's heart pounded, each beat a reminder of the secret he'd buried, the $12,000 he'd given away, the last of Clara's life insurance. He wanted to tell her everything, to unburden himself, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he gestured toward the bench. "Can we sit? Please." She hesitated, then nodded, her expression still hard. They sat, the distance between them more than just the space on the bench. "I don't know where to start," Samuel said, his voice rough. "The $6. $2.18, I took it because I was scared. The house, your mom's house, was slipping away. Taxes, bills, I couldn't keep up. I thought I could win it back at the casino. I was wrong." Emily's jaw tightened. "You thought slot machines would save us. Dad, that was our money. Mine, Michael's, the kids. You didn't even ask us." "I know," he said, his eyes fixed on the ground. "I was ashamed. I didn't want you to see me failing." "Failing?" Her voice rose, sharp enough to draw glances from nearby parents. "You didn't fail because you couldn't pay the bills. You failed because you lied to us. You hid it. Do you know what that did to me? To Michael? We thought you were the one person we could always count on." Her words cut deeper than Samuel expected, slicing through the fragile armor of his excuses. He'd always seen himself as their protector, the man who'd carried them through Clara's illness, who'd promised to keep the family together. Now, he was the one tearing it apart. "I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. "I thought I was protecting you. I didn't want you to worry." "Protecting us?" She laughed, a bitter sound. "You left us in the dark. And now you're still not telling me everything. I can see it in your face. Dad, what else did you do?" Samuel's hands clenched in his lap. The truth about the $12,000 burned in his chest. But he couldn't say it, not here. Not now. Instead, he tried to steer the conversation elsewhere. "Have you talked to Michael? Does he know you're here?" Emily's eyes narrowed. "Don't change the subject. Michael's hurt, too. but he's too stubborn to show it. He thinks you're a lost cause. I'm starting to wonder if he's right. The words stung, but Samuel couldn't argue. He'd lost their trust, and every moment he held back the truth made it worse. He glanced at the playground, where his grandchildren Lily, 8, and Ben, 6, were climbing a slide. Their laughter felt like a memory from another life, one where he was still their hero. I want to make this right, he said. I don't know how, but I'll try. Can you give me a chance? She studied him for a long moment, her expression softening just enough to give him hope. I don't know if I can trust you again, Dad. But the kids, they deserve their grandpa. Come to dinner tomorrow night. Mark's working late, so it'll just be us and the kids. Be honest with me then. No more secrets. Samuel nodded, his throat tight. I'll be there. She stood, brushing leaves from her coat. Don't let me down again. She walked back to the playground, calling for Lily and Ben. Samuel watched them go, his heart a tangle of hope and fear. Tomorrow night could be his chance to rebuild, but only if he found the courage to tell the truth. That night, Samuel sat in his living room, the photograph of him and Clara staring down at him. He could almost hear her voice. Gentle but firm. You can't fix this by hiding, Sam. He knew she was right, but the thought of confessing the donation terrified him. Emily and Michael would see it as another betrayal, another choice he'd made without them. Yet keeping it secret was tearing him apart. He pulled out the letters from the Veterans Charity, tucked away in a drawer. Each one detailed the impact of his donation: a wheelchair for a young soldier, job training for a homeless vet, therapy for a man haunted by war. Samuel had thought he was honoring Clara, giving back to the community they'd both loved. But at what cost? The next evening, Samuel arrived at Emily's house with a knot in his stomach. The kids ran to him, their hugs a fleeting warmth against the chill of his guilt. Emily was quieter, setting the table with a tension that filled the room. Dinner was simple spaghetti and meatballs, the kids' favorite, but every bite felt like a countdown to the moment he'd have to speak. Grandpa, tell us a story, Ben said, sauce smudged on his cheek. Samuel forced a smile, launching into a tale about his Navy days. But his eyes kept drifting to Emily. She was watching him, waiting. When the kids were done eating and ran off to play, she leaned forward. All right, Dad, she said softly. No more stalling. Tell me the rest. Samuel took a deep breath, his hands trembling. The moment had come, and there was no turning back. The dining room felt smaller than Samuel remembered, the air thick with the scent of garlic and the weight of Emily's expectation. Her eyes were locked on his, unyielding, as she waited for the truth. Lily and Ben's laughter drifted from the living room, a stark contrast to the tension at the table. Samuel's hands gripped the edge of his chair, his knuckles white. He'd spent 3 years dodging this moment, but there was no escape now. He began, his voice barely steady. I didn't just lose the $6. 218. There was more. Clara's life insurance $12,000. It's gone, too. Emily's face froze, her fork clattering against her plate. 12,000. Dad, that was Mom's. That was for us. Her voice trembled, caught between shock and anger. You gambled that, too. No, Samuel said quickly, shaking his head. I didn't gamble it. I gave it away. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily's eyes widened, her lips parting as if she couldn't process the words. Gave it away, she whispered. To who? Why? Samuel swallowed, the weight of his confession pressing down on him. To a veterans charity. After the casino, I was desperate to make things right. Your mom always cared about helping people, especially vets. I thought it would honor her. I thought it would fix what I'd broken. Emily stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Fix it. Dad, you gave away our mom's money without telling us. You didn't think we deserved to know. Her voice rose, cracking with emotion. Do you know what that money could have done for us? For the kids. Lily needs braces. Ben's school fees are piling up. And Mark's working overtime just to keep us afloat. And you gave it away. I thought it was the right thing, Samuel said, his voice small. I thought it would make up for the $6. 218. Make up for it. Emily's hands clenched into fists. You don't get to decide that for us. You don't get to play hero with our future. Tears glistened in her eyes, but she blinked them back, her anger burning brighter. You're my father. I trusted you. And you keep breaking that trust. Samuel felt his chest tighten, each word a blow he couldn't dodge. He wanted to explain, to tell her about the veterans he'd helped, the lives he'd changed. But the words felt hollow now. All he could see was Emily's pain, the same pain he'd seen 3 years ago when she'd found the bank statement. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I never meant to hurt you. I was trying to do something good, something your mom would have wanted. Don't bring Mom into this, Emily snapped. She would have wanted us to be okay. She would have wanted you to talk to us, not make decisions behind our backs. She turned away, staring out the window into the darkening night. I don't know if I can do this. Dad, I don't know if I can keep trying with you. The words hit Samuel like a physical force, knocking the air from his lungs. He wanted to reach for her, to beg for forgiveness. But he stayed rooted to his chair, paralyzed by the depth of her hurt. The kids' laughter had stopped, replaced by the soft hum of the TV. Even they could sense the shift in the room. I'll go, Samuel said quietly, standing. I don't want to make this harder for you. Emily didn't look at him. Just, give me time. Dad, I need to think. He nodded, though she couldn't see it, and walked to the door. As he stepped outside, the cold air stung his face, but it was nothing compared to the ache in his chest. He'd come hoping to rebuild, but all he'd done was widen the rift. The drive home was a blur, the headlights cutting through the night like his thoughts through his guilt. When he reached the house, he didn't go inside. Instead, he sat on the porch, staring at the stars Clara used to love. He could almost feel her beside him, her hand on his shoulder, her voice whispering, You can't run from this, Sam. The next morning, Samuel woke to a knock at the door. His heart leapt, hoping it was Emily. But it was Michael. His son stood on the porch, his work jacket zipped against the chill, his face unreadable. Emily called me, he said without preamble. She told me about the $12. 000. Samuel braced himself, expecting another fight. But Michael's tone was calm, almost weary. Why didn't you tell us? Dad, why do you keep shutting us out? I didn't want to burden you, Samuel said, his voice hoarse. I thought I could handle it. Michael shook his head. That's the problem. You always think you have to do it alone. We're your family. We could have figured it out together. For the first time, Samuel saw not just disappointment in Michael's eyes, but a flicker of understanding. It wasn't forgiveness not yet, but it was something. Can I come in? Michael asked. We need to talk. Really talk. Samuel stepped aside, his heart pounding. Maybe this was the start of something new. Or maybe it was another chance to lose everything. Either way, he couldn't hide anymore. The kitchen table, scarred and familiar, became their battleground. Samuel and Michael sat across from each other, the silence heavy with years of unspoken words. The morning light filtered through the window, illuminating the dust motes that danced between them. Michael's work boots left faint dirt marks on the floor, a reminder of the life he'd built outside this house, a life Samuel was no longer part of. "I talked to Emily last night," Michael began, his voice steady but laced with fatigue. "She's a mess, Dad. She wants to forgive you, but she doesn't know how. Neither do I." Samuel nodded, his throat tight. "I don't expect you to. Not after everything." Michael leaned back, studying his father. At 40, he had the same broad shoulders Samuel once had, but his eyes carried a weight that came from years of responsibility raising a family, running a crew at the construction site, and now trying to salvage what was left of their bond. "Tell me about the charity," he said. "All of it." Samuel took a deep breath, the truth spilling out in halting words. He told Michael about the Veterans Charity, about the $12,000 he'd donated in Clara's name. He described the letters, stories of soldiers who'd found hope because of his gift. "I thought it was what your mom would have wanted," he said. "She always said we should give back. I thought it would make things right. After the casino." Michael listened, his face unreadable. When Samuel finished, he didn't speak right away. Instead, he pulled out his phone and scrolled through it, his brow furrowed. "You know," he said finally, "I looked up that charity after Emily called. They do good work. I get why you did it. But Dad, you should have told us. We could have decided together." "I know," Samuel said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was ashamed. I didn't want you to see how far I'd fallen." Michael's jaw tightened. "You didn't fall, Dad. You chose. You chose to hide, to gamble, to give away Mom's money without us. That's what hurts. Not the money, it's the trust." The words were a mirror, reflecting Samuel's failures back at him. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, but there was no defense. Michael was right. "What can I do?" Samuel asked, his voice breaking. "How do I fix this?" Michael leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "Start by being honest. No more secrets. And stop trying to carry it all alone. We're your family. Dad, let us in." For the first time in years, Samuel felt a spark of hope, fragile but real. He nodded, tears stinging his eyes. "I'll try, Michael. I promise." Over the next week, Samuel took small steps. He called Emily, leaving a voicemail when she didn't answer, apologizing again and asking for another chance. He wrote a letter to Michael, detailing every mistake he'd made, every choice that led to this moment. It was painful, like peeling back layers of his own skin, but it felt necessary. Then came the call from the bank. The house was in its final stages of foreclosure. Samuel had known it was coming, but the letter made it real. 30 days to pay or lose the home he and Clara had built. He sat at the kitchen table, the notice in his hands, and for the first time, he didn't try to hide it. He called Michael. "Dad," Michael said when he arrived, the letter in his hands. "Why didn't you tell me it was this bad?" "I didn't want to burden you," Samuel said, the old excuse sounding hollow even to him. Michael shook his head. "Enough of that. We're figuring this out together." He called Emily, and to Samuel's surprise, she came over that evening. The three of them sat in the living room, the photograph of Clara watching over them. Emily was still guarded, her arms crossed, but she was there. "We can't save the house," Michael said, his voice steady, "but we can save what matters. You, Dad, us." Emily nodded, her eyes softening. "I'm still angry," she said, "but I don't want to lose you. Not like we lost Mom." Samuel's tears fell freely now. The weight of their forgiveness, or at least the possibility of it lifting a burden he'd carried too long. They talked late into the night. Not just about the money or the house, but about Clara, about the kids, about the family they'd been and could be again. By the time Emily and Michael left, Samuel felt lighter, though the road ahead was uncertain. The house might be lost, but he'd gained something more precious, a chance to rebuild. He looked at Clara's photograph and whispered, "I'm trying. Clara, I'm trying." The days that followed were a fragile dance of hope and effort. Samuel woke each morning with a purpose he hadn't felt in years. The foreclosure notice still loomed, a ticking clock on the wall. But Emily and Michael's presence in his life again gave him strength. They didn't come every day. Emily's trust was still a work in progress. And Michael's work kept him busy, but they called. They visited. And they listened. For Samuel, it was enough to keep going. One evening, Emily brought Lily and Ben over. The kids ran through the house, their laughter filling the rooms with a warmth Samuel had almost forgotten. They found Clara's old photo albums in the attic, and soon they were sprawled on the living room floor, flipping through memories. "Is this you, Grandpa?" Lily asked, pointing to a young Samuel in his Navy uniform, Clara beaming beside him. "That's me," Samuel said, his voice soft. "And your grandma. She was the best thing that ever happened to me." Emily sat nearby, watching quietly. When the kids ran off to play, she spoke. "I looked up the charity. Dad, the one you gave the money to. Michael was right, they do good work. I wish you'd told us. But I get why you did it." Samuel's heart lifted. "Does that mean you forgive me?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I'm trying. It's going to take time, but I'm trying." That night, after they left, Samuel sat down with a pen and paper. He wrote to the charity, not to ask for the money back, that was impossible, but to thank them for the work they did. He included a small donation, $50 scraped from his pension, and a note in memory of Clara Carter, who believed in second chances. The foreclosure deadline came faster than Samuel expected. On the final day, he stood in the driveway, watching as movers loaded the last of his belongings into a truck. Emily and Michael were there, helping him pack what mattered: Clara's piano, the photo albums, the kids' old drawings. The house would go, but the memories would stay. "We found a place for you, Dad," Michael said, handing him a flyer for a small apartment nearby. "It's not much, but it's close to us. You won't be alone." Samuel took the flyer, his eyes misty. "I don't deserve you to." Emily smiled, a real smile this time. "Maybe not, but you're stuck with us." They moved him into the apartment the next week. It was small, with plain walls and a view of a parking lot. But Lily and Ben decorated it with drawings, and Emily brought over a potted plant from Clara's garden. Michael hung the photograph of Samuel and Clara on the wall, right where he could see it every day. As the weeks turned to months, Samuel rebuilt his life, piece by piece. He volunteered at the Veterans Charity, not as a donor, but as a mentor, sharing his story with others who'd lost their way. Emily invited him to dinner every Sunday, and Michael stopped by after work to share a beer and talk about the old days. The kids called him Grandpa again, their hugs a reminder of what he'd almost lost. One evening, as Samuel sat in his apartment, he opened a letter from Emily. Inside was a photo of the family: Emily, Michael, Mark, Lily, and Ben, taken at the park where he and Emily had reconciled. On the back, she'd written, "We're still here. Dad. We always will be." Samuel held the photo, tears streaming down his face. The $6, $2.18 had torn them apart, and the $12, 000 had nearly destroyed what was left. But in the end, it wasn't the money that mattered. It was the trust they were rebuilding, the love they were rediscovering. He looked at Clara's photograph and smiled. "We're okay. Clara," he whispered. "We're going to be okay."